The students in the cloud. That'll be fine. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're so excited to do this with you today. Justin and I are a hot mess. Let's get that out of the way early. Um,
I,
but
I
we are
would say more
very,
lukewarm mess.
speak for yourself. So, but we're very excited that y'all are here. We're very excited to do this with you because I know that this summer teachers have just like wanted to recharge and have been exhausted after this past year. And so the fact that you are here at all, that you are awake, that you are not sitting on a beach with a fruity drink with an umbrella, we are appreciative of the fact that you decided to spend your Sunday with us.
Very much so. In fact, I am changing my virtual background to a beach.
There we go. All
Not that
right.
anyone should be looking at me anyway.
So I'll go
I'm going to
ahead.
drop into the chat the uh, we'll drop it.
Well,
We're going to drop the
well,
link for the slides so that when you finish here, if you want to go back and take a look at it, you can have all of the links and things that we're putting in there. But either way, welcome. We are so happy to have you.
we are indeed. So a little bit about ourselves. Justin, you want to go first?
Sure. I am Justin. I am the heir to a small fortune in oil production. No, that's not true at all. I have been teaching math outside of Pittsburgh for the last 13, 14 years. I've taught everything from seventh up through high school. Um, I pretend to know what I'm doing online, and as you will very quickly see, I fake it fairly well. Uh, but yeah, I am very happy to have all of you here. And Shelby?
Hi, I don't know how to follow that. I'm Shelby, and I have taught math for the last 8 years. I started off in high school, moved to middle school, fell in love with it, moved to sixth grade, did not fall in love with that. I love sixth graders, and it takes a very special human to love sixth graders because they are a lot. Um, but loving middle school, loving high school, and then wild life stuff happened. So I am not in the classroom currently, but I am trying to get back into classrooms through coaching, through partnerships, things like that. But I'm trying very much to stay in math education because I love it and I love all the awesome things that are happening, especially in the last couple of years, all of these new paths that we're taking, all of these ways that we are trying to honor students and to give them some sort of ownership, like Melissa was saying earlier, finding joy, really.
So, we want to talk a little bit today about the idea of questions and the different kinds of questions that there are. So, for example, there are small questions and there are big questions. Small questions are ones that have small consequences. So, things like what color shirt should I wear? What should I watch on TV tonight? What should I have for lunch? These are the smaller questions. They're important, but they don't impact our lives in massive ways. There are, however, big questions. These are the deeper ones that have uh, much deeper existential and long-lasting consequences. These big questions like, why are we here? What is the meaning of life? What career path is going to be right for me? These big questions have big consequences. So we also talk a lot about this idea of good questions and bad questions, but I don't believe that there are good questions and bad questions. What I believe is that there are interesting questions and there are boring questions. And that's a very important distinction for me. So I want you to take, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds, toss into the chat. What do you think makes a question interesting? I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about that and throw it in the chat for us.
And I discovered that I cannot open the chat while I'm sharing my screen, so I have just opened my chat on my phone. So differing opinions, more than one answer, debatable as opposed to factual. I have an opinion about it, of course, like not just interesting, but is it interesting to me? I like that. It's
Mm.
open-ended, requires people to think.
Ooh, I like answer is not obvious.
I do like that.
Ooh, not
Sparks curiosity.
these are excellent.
I love this. The answer is not yes or no. Okay, so they're not like a clear binary to the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is great. So, has a big effect on something important. Okay. So I've sort of come to this conclusion that interesting questions are ones that foster and encourage discussion. They create more questions. So that idea of open-ended, but also open-ended in a way that produces more inquiry. So in order for students, in order for anyone to have a discussion, it requires that we listen to others, that we are providing constructive feedback, and that we're asking clarifying questions. Things along the lines of, I like how you said this. What do you mean by this thing? And I disagree with what you said because. So we're
With
going to
that
use
being
this.
said, go for it, Justin.
No, go ahead.
With that being said, we do have what we consider to be one of the great philosophical questions of our time. Some of you will have seen this coming, but like I tell my students all the time, no spoilers. So we're going to ask you something that has caused strife and turmoil, has torn families apart. It's a very, very important question. And the question is a hot dog a sandwich?
Now, this seems like a very easy question. Yes, of course it is. Or no, of course it isn't. But it can get a lot deeper than that. And this is our first activity for you. So I am throwing into the chat a link to a Padlet. We're going to give you some independent think time, and then we're going to go into some breakout rooms and share that thinking. On that Padlet, if you click on that and open it up, it will pull up the question for you, which is, what makes something a sandwich? In order to define whether a hot dog is or is not a sandwich, we need to determine what makes something a sandwich. So take a little bit of time right now. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to compose your thoughts and put them on there, and then we're going to discuss.
All right, Justin, do you want to send the breakout rooms right now or give everybody a chance to think here on the whole group?
I think we'll stay here for whole group, and then we'll go to breakout rooms after everyone's had a chance to put their thoughts down.
Julie said in the chat, it's so hard to get middle schoolers to listen to each other sometimes. Girl, yes. We will talk
By
about
middle
that more.
schoolers, yeah, by middle schoolers, I assume she means all human beings who have ever existed.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a delight and I get along with everyone.
I'm going to mute myself so nobody can hear my laughter.
Mm-hmm. Go open this Padlet and see what y'all are getting up to in there. Ooh. Come back. Here it is.
All right, so there's some pretty amazing answers on here, but sort of as we said a little bit ago, what makes a question interesting is not just the answer, but the discussion that it fosters. And this is really, really important for us moving forward. So here is the task that we have for you. We are going to break everybody up into some randomly generated breakout rooms, and we want to set some ground rules for you. So you're going to look and see on the Padlet what other people have written. We want you to answer, think about some questions. So what you saw there, was there anything that clarified your thinking? And what we mean by that is something that someone else has written that might make you realize, oh, yeah, that's exactly it. Or no, absolutely not. That's obviously false. The real question is there something on there that would make you punch a stranger in the face because they gave that answer to your question? So we're going to send you into some breakout rooms, and we just want you to discuss this together. And as a small group in that breakout room, see if you can come up with a consensus definition for what makes something a sandwich. We're going to give you about 5 minutes, and then we'll bring everybody back and we'll have that discussion as a group. Any
And
questions?
bonus round would be based on the criteria that you and your group come up with, can you come up with some examples and non-examples? All right,
Any
questions
questions
before we
before
let you
we
duke it
send
out.
anyone? All right.
And off we go.
If you did not get a breakout room invitation, please let us know.
Please, please, please. I'm trying to figure out, my phone is trying to go to a breakout room. It's fine. I'm going to just put it in this one here. We're good. All
Okay.
right. I'm going to go let them know it's my phone.
Sure. Since you're actually going to get to eat a sandwich.
All right, so the real question is, that's a problem. Oh, I was using my phone to monitor the chat and then tried to come off mute, and it was not happening. Okay, so far so good, I think.
I think so as well.
All right, do we want to hop into some breakout rooms and see?
I can only go into the one that you assigned me.
Oh,
I can't jump around.
okay.
But that's fine. I mean, I can be here if you want to hop through.
Well, why don't you join that room, and then when you're ready to come out, leave it, and then I'll put you in another room, and I'll be in here being the moderator person.
All right. You want to put me somewhere else?
Hey, Dana, do you need a room?
Yeah, sorry, I joined in late. I'm sorry.
No worries at all. Let's get you somewhere.
Thank you.
All right. Let's put you with these folks. I'm glad you could join us.
Thanks.
Alicia, you need a room? Hi, Alicia. Hi, Tara. Thanks for joining us. I will put you, let's see, which rooms don't have a lot of people? Alicia, I'm going to put you here. I'll put you here. All right, share screen again while everybody's coming back.
Actually, you can keep the screen share off so we can have a sort of face-to-face.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Welcome back, everybody. We've still got folks trickling back in, wrapping up their conversations. Everybody's clinging on to these last couple of seconds.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Sorry that we had to pull you from what I'm sure were fierce debates. Hope nobody threw any elbows. So what we're going to ask now is if anyone wants to share what their group has decided is a sandwich. Go ahead and unmute. Let us know about it. If you feel like putting it in the chat, totally fine too.
Well, I don't know if we decided anything, but I think one of the big keys that we discussed that needs to be part of the conversation is about the difference between a sandwich as a noun and sandwiching as a verb, because sandwiching as a verb simply just implies that you have two things in between two other things, like and right at the end, I think Beatrice was talking in our group about, like, you can't be sandwiched with one thing. You have to have something pressing in on you on both sides, right? So like a sandwich cookie or an ice cream sandwich. But you could also talk about like people being sandwiched in between, I don't know, other people on the subway, for example. So then we're having that conversation and then of course debating, as I can see Mo has put it in the chat there, about open face sandwiches and how we've adopted terminology to mean something based on our personal expectations or not. So we did not come to a consensus, as you can imagine, but that notion of the verb of being sandwiched, I think, was something that we need to explore further.
Like it. Mo, do you want to say a little bit more about open face sandwiches, or anybody else want to chime in on that front?
I just thought it was interesting that when I asked that in my group, someone says, well, I would be disappointed if I ordered a sandwich and it came open faced. So that made me
So
laugh.
we also worked, Caitlin had suggested the idea of sandwich as a descriptor, and where our group came to a consensus was two same things with something different in the middle. And then we wondered, could it go beyond food? And we were more comfortable with it being only food. And then a hot dog, if your bun falls apart like mine always do, if they're two separate bun pieces, then we would call it a sandwich. But if it was stuck together, then it wouldn't be. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. That seems like if something can change while I'm in the midst of eating it, I don't know.
Can I just say, the first time that this open face sandwich aspect of the conversation came up, I was so confused because I've never seen an open face sandwich in my life. Like tuna melts are not a thing in New Orleans. So I was very confused. I was like, what are you people talking about? Like like, are you folding it over? What's happening here?
So funny. So I lived in Europe for some time and they are all about open face sandwiches there. And so that's like my big part of this discussion is, well, what about open face sandwiches? You can't forget about those.
No context there for me whatsoever.
My
Josh,
group,
I see you. What you doing, Josh?
I just want to bring up another consideration that I hadn't thought of before and that came up today was I think the outer layer, it has to be something that facilitates grabbing it. Like if it doesn't turn non-finger food into finger food, it's not a proper sandwich. So you can't just have like melted cheese as the outside layers. That's wrong.
So what you're saying is you're
groups-
not a fan of the double decker.
Right.
Well-
One of the groups I jumped into was talking about like a lettuce wrap and using lettuce as that outside
Yeah,
piece.
well, because I mean that's still let's grab it, right? I mean, like you can stick like your filling and and like stick whatever you want inside, mustard or whatever, and you're still grab. Now you're not getting mustard on your hands, so
I don't think I called it right. What was that? You know that abomination from KFC that I'm talking about? The one where it was the chicken patty and the bun and the burger patty and the chicken patty. Like, I mean, is that a burger?
I mean, don't the chicken patties then have like some kind of breading for when it's like cooked or fried or whatever? So
I
maybe
mean, they're fried, yeah.
Or maybe that's just another degenerate case.
Are chicken tenders a sandwich because the breading on the outside?
so my group discussed, we got pretty specific kind of with the language we used with our definition. So we talked about it had to be parallel layers of items. So there has to be a defined top and bottom, and then the sides are open. There has to be so that would include an open face sandwich because it doesn't necessarily has to be the same two objects, but there are parallel layers and the sides are open.
Karen is losing
Emma,
it in the chat at parallel.
Emma, you're saying no hot pockets then?
So no hot pockets. And no hot dogs, because hot dogs would be closed on a side.
We talked about how even cookies could be a sandwich.
Yeah, cookie, like an ice cream sandwich. You could have a people sandwich. You have two people, one person in the middle, standing up.
I think that was the special for the Donner Party, right?
Never mind. I was going to ask about edible.
The Oreos, yeah.
What about Uncrustables?
Oh yes, where the crust has been taken off.
I thought we were discussing food.
Popped. So now we're moving into the area of Pop-Tarts and ravioli, which is actually something we are going to be talking about. This is fantastic. And I want to point out sort of how easily this entire conversation can just sort of expand outward in a direction that's not necessarily anticipated. So looking at that idea of that, especially the open face sandwich, which is something I come back to with my students, which is if that is a sandwich, or if it is a sandwich, then that means that essentially a pizza is a sandwich. But if it's not, if a pizza is its own distinct thing, then a tuna melt is really just a fish pizza with mayonnaise sauce. And people are just not ready for that conversation. So moving on a little bit, I want to talk a little bit sort of about the history of sandwich chat. So the earliest that I've been able to trace this as sort of a Twitter phenomenon goes back to May of 2014, where Megan and Christopher had this discussion back and forth. And this is the sort of the first use of the hashtag sandwich chat going through. But this isn't just on Twitter, right? The idea of sandwich chat exists outside of that sort of self-contained universe. Christopher wrote a blog post about it as well, which we will have the link for you in the notes afterwards. I've also written a couple of blog posts myself about how I use this particular thing in my classrooms. And so that's what we really want to talk about next, is how do we use this?
And I think this is really important because math has a little bit of a reputation, right? You know, it's dry, it's boring, it's painful, it's frustrating. There's one right answer, there's one right way of doing things. And as Justin and I were kind of planning this talk and even before this, just talking about how we've used Sandwich Chat in our classrooms, we realized that we had the same idea and took it in completely different paths. So one of the things that we thought about was there are a lot of the standards for math practice present here in this activity. So these are just the 4 that we picked out, but you could make an argument for just about any of them. So in particular, look for and express regularity and repeated reasoning, making sure that, you know, if I'm calling this thing a sandwich, then by that definition, this thing is also a sandwich. Constructing viable arguments and critiquing the reasoning of others. Now we joke about, you know, students coming to blows over their definitions of sandwiches, but really using this as a structure for your argument has to be made with the power of your words and the power of having compelling logic and evidence and not just being the loudest in the room.
Absolutely. So looking at sort of extensions from this exact discussion, how do we then leverage this into deeper discussions in math? So we can have this question of how sandwichy is a sandwich? What are the key features? And then looking at that visualization. And with that in mind, there is a Google form that I just put into the chat that I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to go through and fill out. There are no wrong answers except for the ones that disagree with me. But that's all right. It will still be anonymous, so I'm not going to call anybody out for their incredibly wrong opinions. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to go through that, and then we're going to look at the visualizations of the results.
And I feel like we've done a pretty good job of all of these kind of examples that were coming up earlier, Pop-Tarts, Oreos, they might make an appearance.
When you have finished with that form, if you could just put a thumbs up or something in the chat, let us know that you're done.
I love watching people's faces as they get to certain, like I can almost predict where they are in the survey based on their faces. All right, looks like folks are coming to the end, so.
Yep, we have a lot of answers in there, which is great. Shelby, can you share the results of that, or would you like me to?
I can absolutely do that. Let's stop share and I will,
Right.
oh, let's see. Actually, can you do it for me since I don't have to go dig for it?
Totes my goats. All right, so. All right, so this seemed pretty good way to start out. Looking at the BLT, the majority of everybody, we have 37 responses right now. 73% said absolutely 100% a BLT is a sandwich. Absolutely love it. Wings, pretty much absolutely not. I am super curious about this one right here. My guess is this sort of stemmed out of that comment about chicken tenders and having a breading on the outside. It's good stuff.
Influencing the data.
Yep, absolutely. The club sandwich. This one with my students also gets a slightly lower response than the BLT because there's a piece of bread in the middle. So now we're looking at sort of an extra little thing thrown in there. The wrap, oh, all over the place. This
There's
is
that distribution.
great, right? This is fantastic. That's everywhere. I love it. Next up, the hot dog. I think that's skewed a little bit more. Oh, we got a whole lot of solid maybes with that one. Okay.
Solid maybe.
Yeah, solid maybe. Tacos, looks like we're skewing towards no. A pizza, oh, all right. So interesting.
I'm actually really surprised that the data cuts off at 6.
Yeah, me too. I was expecting at least one a little bit higher up there. That's all right.
Oh, Julie's put something in the chat that I love. She said it would be fun to show the data and then make them guess which one it was. Which one's the wrap, which one's the BLT.
Ooh, that's excellent.
I love that.
We're going to do that for when we present this at NCTN. Let's make a note of that. Pop-Tart. Again, sort of all over the place, but some pretty solid no's.
Okay, timeout. How did the Pop-Tart get a 9, but the one above it didn't go past a 6? I have questions, people.
I don't, okay. All right. Oreos, for the most part, we're looking at skewed yeses. Okay. That thing, this is the baguette. Yeah, this one's all over the place.
That's my favorite picture in this whole entire form.
One of the things that I had to emphasize with my students, and I put at the top of the form, was this idea of like, you're not voting on whether you like the sandwich. You're just voting on whether or not it is one. And I would say that one is definitely a sandwich. It's a terrible sandwich. And then the lunchbox itself, I love that there are 8s, 9s, and 10s as a response to this, that the lunchbox itself is a sandwich. Then that starts that discussion of whether or not it needs to be edible. Oh, these are great results. Y'all are beautiful and amazing. I'm going to kick it back to Shelby, jump back into our slides, right? A pizza as an open face sandwich. Barbara, that's sort of my point as well.
Ooh,
so
too far.
Oh no.
No. So one of the things that Justin was talking about, because like I said, we take this in very different directions in our own classrooms, was this idea of creating this number line, this rubric of sandwichiness, so to speak, and deciding, that having it spaced out, obviously a sandwich, obviously not a sandwich, putting some markers in there for students, the BLT or a castle, and having those kind of thumbprints along the way of this is definitely a sandwich, this is definitely not, and then putting some of these items on Post-it notes for kids and letting them go and rank it themselves. Where on this number line should this thing fall, especially in relation to other established goalposts?
Right, absolutely. And looking at this idea of examples, non-examples, definitions, if you're looking for administrative buzzwords, this falls very solidly into the idea of the Freyer model, because you can have that visualization, and starting your year off with this allows students to see what you're looking at in terms of that Freyer model for something that's very low stakes, except it's really high stakes because a sandwich is important, but also have that thing to refer back to when you're looking at other things. This is one of my absolute favorite visualizations for this idea of what makes something a sandwich. And this is that cube rule of food. So which sides of the food product are filled in, and then where does it fall in this particular spectrum? And showing students, again, this visualization, this 3D idea of how do we apply these concepts mathematically, and how do they apply not just to what's in the textbook or what's in our homework, but how we think about things makes it the math that it is. So one of the other things that I've been looking at is what task I can set for students once this has happened. And looking at this idea of having the students create a rubric to evaluate the sandwichiness of an object. Where does it fall? And not just based on what do you think, but having very specific criteria that might end up with interesting results based on how you define your sandwich. Some things might come out as very sandwichy that you would not suspect. And then moving again further from there, this idea of the sandwich matrix and having students be able to identify things on graphs and visualizations in outside of numerical contexts. So looking at this one in particular, that egg sandwich from Black Tree, what does it mean for it to be specifically at that point where it is? The differences in indulgence between the hippie banjo and the Bialy egg sandwich. You notice on the x-axis, those are only 1 point apart. So how do we define that level of indulgence? And then how do we explain that to others? And so looking forward from that, students are already doing this kind of ranking all the time. On Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, there are all of these quizzes that pop up that are there for you to define how Southern you are, how Yinzer you are. For those of you who are not familiar, that's a Pittsburgh thing. Hopefully most of you come in as like 0 or 1 on that one.
I'm glad you defined that for me because I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, Yinzer is it's the Pittsburgh term. And then moving beyond even this into the sandwich alignment chart. So of the things that you believe what a sandwich is or is not, how do you fall on this? For those of us who are slightly more nerdy inclined, this is how I hook in my Dungeons and Dragons students, because this idea of an alignment chart of lawful good, lawful evil, where they fall on there, these alignment charts they exist for pretty much any subject that you can find. So it's not just sandwiches. We found another example from Laura Hawkins that was the tea alignment chart and what counts as tea. And my absolute favorite piece of this is preparation rebel, ingredient rebel, Saturn is a tea. And this is entirely based on the definitions that are being used in these specific things. So using it as tea, but also more than sandwiches, you can ask all of these other extension questions. So how does a centaur wear their pants? I did one of those in Desmos this year where I just put that picture up without the pants, and I had the task was draw pants on this centaur. And students used the drawing tool to put on where they thought the pants were going to go. How does a xenomorph wear its hat? Where does a giraffe wear his tie? These are all these questions that can provoke the deeper discussions that we're looking for from our students.
And for those of you who are in the Twitter realm, you will know that it wasn't a centaur, it was a dog, but we had a very fierce discussion about pants chat and about the appropriate level of butthole coverage and like what are the defining characteristics of pants. And that kind of gets into the way that I use sandwich chat in my classroom, which is it's all about communication, because there's kind of this dichotomy that exists, or that people think exists, between math and ELA, where it's, I'm an English person or I'm a math person, and we know that that's false, but it's a really stubborn sort of myth that persists. And so we encourage students to get their thoughts out. NCTM standards for school mathematics even say it's important to avoid a premature rush to impose formal mathematical language, because sometimes it's just getting things out of your brain and into the world with words, on paper, whatever. But after that initial, that is not a phrase I want to use, after that initial expression of ideas, we really want to start moving them into, if I say sandwich and you say sandwich, and we are not in agreement on that definition, then we're having two different conversations. And a lot of us see this all the time with students who talk about fractions, and they refer to everything as a number. it gets really confusing really quickly if you're saying number and I'm saying number and we're talking about completely different things. So after introducing my students to sandwich chat, we kind of continue this idea of if we're going to be using a word, we should really be on the same page about what that word means. So in the top left corner, you can see we were talking about dilations one year and asked students for a definition, got a pretty good definition, they could work with that. And because of the skills that we had developed through sandwich chat, because of being able to make compelling arguments, to give really specific criteria, we turned that definition from the top left into the definition on the bottom right. So this is one of the things that I use in my classroom, and I actually got this out of a book that appeared in my teacher mailbox one day, and I kind of just tossed it in the cabinet in my room. And then one day I was going through looking for resources, and I was like, I guess maybe I should put some effort into this, and found this idea of this vocabulary square. So this, no one is talking to you. Why are you here? Sorry, a black tail is going to appear in just a moment. So if you know me at all, you know that I have my issues with this insistence on literacy in the classroom at the expense of numeracy in the classroom, but it is still important to strengthen communication skills in our students. This kind of creates a nice bridge between the two. So using those criteria, coming up with examples and not examples, and you don't have to use these 4 different categories. You can put whatever you need here, but this supports this idea that these are not 2 opposing camps. These subjects are intricately linked with one another. And to kind of reinforce that with my kids, I am not the cute person with decorative borders kind of thing. I just don't have it in me to keep up with that. And so what I would do in my classroom is I dedicated a little section of my board to our math words. And we would update them with every unit. I would put up whatever words I thought we needed throughout that particular unit. But you can see, especially my pre-algebra group on the right, as we would come across new words, students would suggest to me, can you put that up there? So that way, when I'm trying to talk, if that word is on the tip of my tongue and I just can't reach it, I can go and grab that word that I need and use it to make sure that my definition is really well supported, that I am giving an argument that is going to convince people because I'm using the words that will do the convincing. And then the last thing is that this idea of argument in math class, this idea of debate in math class, of conversation, of communication, it's really gaining a lot of traction. And so if you haven't done so already, please make sure that you check out Debate Math with Chris Luzniak. He's making all sorts of really great Desmos activities. He's got, when we share this link, you can check out some of the resources he has on his website. But what we're really hoping here is that this makes you feel a little bit more comfortable and confident in the idea that it's okay to let kids argue. An argument itself is not a dirty word. There's a lot of, why can't everyone get along and why does everything have to turn into an argument? Arguments in and of themselves aren't bad. Arguments that aren't based in logic or arguments that attack the person and not the ideas, that's where things start to fall apart. And so if we want people in society to be able to disagree with each other respectfully, we have to teach them how.
I think it's also very important when looking at Chris's work to note that that this is debate math. It is not math debates, because as soon as you start saying that in front of a group of 8th grade boys, you've lost them for life. So you don't want math debates, you want debate math. So we would very much love for you to connect with us. If you have not done so already, yeah, you can connect with Shelby, but also very much connect with me. I'm so lonely. Oh, God. We are so glad that you were able to join us today.
And yeah, we've got 5 minutes, so let's open the floor. If anybody has any ideas that they want to share out, any concerns that might come up.
What norms do you set? Like, what are the ground rules when you set this up for your classroom? Like, I'm sure you don't have 10 things you tell the kids, but what are the 3 things you tell them so that you don't end up with fights?
So I actually got rid of class rules a couple of years ago, and I instead established guiding principles. And so what I would do is I would introduce these 4 words or 4 phrases to my students. And the 4 words or phrases were appreciation, attentive listening, integrity, and mutual respect. So after we had sandwich chat, I would ask students to, just like we asked them to define a sandwich, the next day I would ask them to define these 4 words and come up with examples and counterexamples and criteria. And so these 4 things would be kind of the guide for our classroom, and any class rules that we might have had would have been based on these 4 principles. It would have been, borrowing something and returning it, that's mutual respect. Not speaking while someone else is talking, that's attentive listening. And by establishing and letting the students kind of come up with those definitions and come up with how that looked in our classroom, we made posters out of these and kept them up in the room. And so throughout the year, we would refer back to those. And in the context of sandwich chat, setting up the parameters, this was usually like a first or second day of school activity, so it would be a little chaotic at first. I do love Josh's hand raising. But it also created the need for norms. It created the need for, did it feel good when you were trying to explain yourself and someone was talking over you? Did it feel good when you felt you made a really logical argument and someone shut you down because they thought you were stupid and didn't feel like listening to you? And I'm all about creating the needs for things, creating the needs for norms, creating the needs for shared definitions, creating the needs for graphs. And so if I tell a student we need this because it's important, they're gonna be like, haha, okay. But if they realize themselves, oh, if I don't have this, I can't do what I need to do, they're much more likely to be in it and be kind of committed to that idea. List the 4 principles, please. You got it. I will drop those into the chat. Josh, I see you. Go for it, sir.
Right. Is cereal soup?
Yes.
Obviously.
Clearly, yes.
A constant discussion that I am having with Taylor Belcher is the idea that all food can be classified as either soup or sandwich. And inevitably someone comes up with, well, what about this? And it's something strange. And it's going to be clearly either a soup or a sandwich. And I sort of like that idea that was mentioned earlier of whether it can be held in your hand. And if you can hold it, it's most likely going to be a sandwich. And if you can't, if you need some other sort of non-edible containment vessel, then that's going to be a soup.
And sorry, coffee drinkers, coffee is hot bean soup.
It is if you get a mocha latte, it is a 3-bean salad.
Wet salad.
I know we're like way off the rails. Any other questions before we head out?
Well,
Christina, I see you. What you got?
I was going to make a comment about when you're talking about the 4, what you set up, and about having these discussions. I don't know, has anybody looked at that book, the Building Thinking Building Thinking Math Classrooms or whatever?
Oh, the one by Peter. Yes. I am obsessed with the idea of this book because I see everyone talking about building thinking classrooms.
There we go.
So actually, I'm finishing up my grad program right now, and my cohort has decided we are absolutely purchasing. Sarah's holding it up. Let me spotlight Sarah. Can I spotlight Sarah? Spotlight. There we go.
Yes. Yes.
We're planning on doing a book study on this book because I think that this is absolutely like where we need to go with this.
Our school district was doing one. They've already held one, and then they're doing one this summer, and we've already done the first 3 chapters, which is all about this idea of talking, non-curriculum talking. And what we just did is exactly what it was saying and representing, is you want the kids to talk. There's no right or wrong answer. You want them to be able to use their voice and cover what you said, listening and respecting others, but yet have those discussions.
100%. And stand in your convictions. If you know that you are right, do not let somebody who's louder than you convince you that you are wrong.
Yeah.
All right, so we are at time. Thank you all so much for coming and hanging out with us. I hope that you got something out of this. I hope that this was an enjoyable way to spend your Sunday evening. I know that we're about to go to the favorite thing session for Howie. Thank you. We're really glad that you came and hung out with us today.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Shelby, what did you call those 4 things? Not rules, but you called them
guiding principles.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. And happy to chat about those more. Connect with me on Twitter, and I will be happy to talk about that more.
Thank you so much, Shelby and Justin, for presenting.
Thank you
Our
for giving us
pleasure.
this opportunity, Howie.
Thank you for all the work you're doing, Howie. This is
Heck
great.
yeah.
Thanks. Okay, see ya.
All right, everybody, I'm going to stop the recording and close the room.